important thing to know about an assassination or attempted assassination is not who fired the shot, but who paid for the bullet. Eric Ambler. Bullets are certainly the most obvious form of assassination, including starting the First World War. But they're not the only form. This week, the last week of November 2023, reports have surfaced that the wife of the Ukrainian military intelligence chief, Mariana Budanova, is in the hospital being treated for heavy metal poisoning. Although her reaction was the worst, several other officials are also experiencing less intense reactions consistent with poison, possibly from a dinner. Although not an everyday event, the idea of poisoning carried out by Russia on political enemies is something with enough background in history that people generally believe it. Even the most news-avoidant of personalities can probably name several recent poisoning victims. Alexei Navalny, the Skripals in Salisbury, Viktor Yushchenko, and Alexander Litvinenko are generally the first names that come to mind. In fact, at one point during a 2018 investigation into the Salisbury poisonings, which introduced Novichok to the popular lexicon, the argument between the UK and Russia descended into dueling media quotes from Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment. Truthfully, though, poison as a Russian government weapon has existed since at least the middle 1400s, although it was never the only method of assassination used, or even the most popular. Long before civilization entered the 21st century, the Soviet poisonings during the Cold War had achieved such a level of popular myth that it became a prominent theme in the James Bond franchise. Often seemingly far-fetched fiction, there was actually a basis in reality. In existence since an order by Lenin in 1921, the Soviet poison factory Kamera, although it was known by many names throughout its existence, existed to eliminate those who were seen as a threat to the Soviet Union. As described by the former GRU officer Boris Boldarsky, the poisons must make the victim's death or illness appear natural, or at least produce symptoms that will baffle doctors and forensic investigators. To this end, the Kamera developed its defining specialty, combining known poisons into original and untraceable forms. Although the US and Soviet Union signed agreements limiting this sort of research before the USSR collapsed, several defectors have come forward with evidence that the work of the Kamera continued. As well, the number of poisonings since 2000 alone seem to indicate the truth of their assertions. Even those publicly loyal to the current power in Russia have been on the receiving end of various nebulously identified toxins. The Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich and his party experienced peeling skin and temporary blindness after a negotiation in Ukraine in 2022. Perhaps the most famous assassination of the Soviet era was that of Georgy Markov, a Bulgarian writer and dissident who was pricked by an umbrella in London in 1978. The umbrella deposited a pellet under his skin, which contained the poison ricin. With no previous understanding of such an assassination method, authorities were skeptical of Markov's story, even after his death a few days later. Truthfully, even if his claims had been believed, Markov could not have been saved. The truth became obvious when another Bulgarian victim of a pellet poisoning was located in Paris, although in the instance of Vladimir Kostov, things were botched and he survived. Markov was not assassinated by the KGB. In fact, when the Bulgarian government asked for an assassination, Brezhnev declined to have the Soviets actively participate, although he was happy to supply the poison. Markov may have been the most sensational James Bond type poisoning, but he was far from a lone incident. In 1957, a defector from the recently renamed KGB was poisoned in Frankfurt, Germany. Nikolai Kokhlov certainly knew about the various poisons used to assassinate Soviet enemies. He himself had been an assassin who defected in 1954 rather than killing an assigned target. Kokhlov had a policy of not eating or drinking anything given to him by someone he didn't know, but was briefly persuaded out of that rule by an interviewing journalist. Kokhlov survived, but an investigation showed that he had been ingesting the heavy metal thallium, likely in the tea prepared for him at his interview. This is widely considered the first radiological attack by the Soviet Union. Kokhlov's career as an assassin had been closely intertwined with the poison factory. The weapon he was given was a type of gun with bullets of potassium cyanide. Another assassin, Bohdan Stashinsky, defected in 1961, just before the erection of the Berlin Wall. He used a type of cyanide gun as well, which made it look as though victims had suffered a heart attack. Western intelligence was wary of Stashinsky's claims, and he was sent to prison in Germany for the 2 Munich area assassinations of Ukrainian dissenters he had carried out. The tea that Kokhlov drank was a common vehicle for poison administration, and it continues to be so today. Both Anna Politkovskaya and Litvinenko were administered poison in their tea. And so it was with one of the most famous generals of the White Army in exile in 1928. General Pyotr Wrangel officially died of tuberculosis, but his family, and many others, have long asserted that his tea was poisoned by a family butler, a man who just so happened to be a Soviet agent. The charge of assassination has no definitive proof, but both of the men who followed Wrangel as head of the Russian émigrés were also assassinated by the Soviets, albeit much more openly and obviously. And Wrangel's family firmly believed that he didn't die of natural circumstances. Given that one of the rules of the poison laboratory was to make the victims' deaths look either natural or completely baffling, it seems that the death of General Wrangel certainly checked that box. Tea was not the only method used for administering a poison, and the Soviet government did not officially countenance every assassination that took place in its name. In the 1936 case of Nestor Lakoba, the man who nearly single-handedly delivered Abkhazia to the Bolsheviks, the method of administration was wine, and the administrator of the poison was none other than the future head of Soviet intelligence and known child molester, murderer, Lavrentiy Beria. Lakoba and Stalin were close, with Stalin choosing to vacation at a dacha in Abkhazia and making wordplay jokes on Lakoba's name and Stalin's revolutionary pseudonym of Koba. It was Lakoba who facilitated the rise of Beria until Beria decided to eclipse his patron. The turning point was Lakoba's refusal of Stalin's offer to head Soviet intelligence in Moscow. Lakoba wished to remain in Abkhazia. Stalin saw this as a betrayal, and Beria jumped on the chance. Officially, Lakoba's death was ruled a heart attack, but he was quickly labeled an enemy of the people. His family were tried, and many executed. Beria later dug up Lakoba's body and cremated it, ostensibly because an enemy of the people did not deserve to be buried in Georgian soil, but more likely to cover up any proof of poisoning. Death by poison was certainly not limited to those outside the Soviet Union. And, in fact, the Camera, or Laboratory X, as it was also known, tested its substances on political prisoners, at least one of whom was an American citizen who had acted as a Soviet agent. Isaiah Oggins began working for the communists before they even adopted the name of the Soviet Union. But his long service did not protect him from the purges. In 1939, Oggins was arrested by Soviet agents, convicted as a traitor, and sent to Gulag. His wife, also a Soviet agent, begged the United States government for information about her missing husband and to intervene to bring him home. She did not seem to have sensed any irony in her situation. As a release time for Oggins drew nearer, he was murdered, using an injection of curare in 1947, with his official cause of death being sclerosis. It seems that the danger of the secrets Oggins might be able to disseminate may have doomed him to end life as a poison factory test subject. Other suspected victims of Laboratory X include the Swedish diplomat Raoul Wallenberg and NKVD officer and assassin team member Avram Slutsky. We probably shouldn't merely focus on the 20th century and the Soviet Union, although examples from there are plentiful. Russian history has many more examples of extrajudicial poisoning, beginning with the usurper Grand Prince of Moscow, Dmitry Shemyaka, who had the previous prince blinded when he took power and ruled so badly that he lost all support during his time in power. Shemyaka was poisoned during a chicken dinner. His cook paid off by Muscovites in 1453. There was enough political poisoning to make it the first thought of Tsar Ivan Grozny, known in English as Ivan the Terrible, when his beloved first wife died. Anastasia Romanova died in 1560 of a lingering illness, one that the Tsar blamed on poisoning by the boyars. He went on an execution spree, and it's pretty clear that this is the moment when his personality changed and he became the dark, dangerous, terrifying ruler we're familiar with through history and folklore. As a quick aside, Anna's body was exhumed and tested in the 1990s, and incredibly high concentrations of mercury were found in her remains. Although this could possibly prove that she was poisoned as her husband suspected, it could also be evidence from any of her contemporary cures that used mercury as a healing agent. Poison as a method of political assassination is certainly nothing new, nor is it confined to the Soviet Union or Russia. In large part, it strikes terror into those who may be on assassination lists, because every morsel of food and every sip of drink could be the delivery agent of death. Advances in delivery method have made even breathing a possibly deadly act. Those who have angered the wrong government are never able to feel safe, and those who use poison understand this very well, even if they were unable to carry out an assassination. They are able to carry out the terror of possibilities. And due to the amount of time it takes for poison to take effect and for authorities to figure out that a poisoning has taken place, this method of assassination offers a bonus of ability for assassins to get away in time, protecting not only themselves, but the information and intelligence that the assassins could disclose to investigators. Certainly not foolproof, but poison has a lot to recommend it as a method of eliminating enemies. As always, there is so much more to the history of assassins, poison, the history of Russia, and we have barely even scratched the surface of anything we've discussed. I truly hope you'll use this episode as a jumping off point to learn more. Please read more, go back further, and make sure you can find these places on a map.